What the hell was I thinking about going after Anthony and Vivian? I'm so grateful. Veronica Figoli, I was born and raised in Venezuela to a middle-class family of an Italian father who I adore and a Venezuelan mother. The youngest of 5 children, I grew up Catholic and very conservative. Over time in Venezuela, I saw the wealth gap growing wider and wider until the band broke. I saw lavish wealth while growing up. I remember as a kid having lunch at a friend's house, being served food on a silver tray by servants donning white gloves. As I enjoy my meal very much, let's be honest, I remember feeling a strange feeling about the whole thing. My thoughts went to those children in the slums, some of whom I felt sure would go to bed hungry that night. I then remember witnessing conversations where people expressed shock about the political revolt in our country. Of course there was a political revolt. We were the countries of haves and have-nots. Perhaps I was too young to fully comprehend everything I had observed and put it all together. But in my tender mind, I knew there was something wrong. I knew there was a reason for the uprising in Venezuela. There were villains, of course, and there were saviors. Some would say former President Chavez was the villain. Others claim he was the savior. And I began to witness conversations among my own family turn from enjoyable afternoon talks to heated battlegrounds. I witnessed an argument with my brother storm out of the house in anger, and my dad retreated to his room. I witnessed a conversation between my mother and my aunt that escalated in tension that divided our families for many years. Today, they're 86 and 88 respectively. And at a point in their life where it's difficult to converse because they both need hearing aids and they're losing their cognitive abilities. I noticed in my own family there were villains and there were saviors. Back then, I couldn't see what all of these experiences were preparing me for. I came to the US to learn English in 1999, and since then, I have encountered many interesting people with different perspectives and different backgrounds, some of which are in this room. I remember in my first month in Atlanta, a conversation with an older woman, Doña Elsa. As we gather around her kitchen table, covered in photo vinyl tablecloth, the smell of strong coffee, Celia Cruz playing in the background, created a fitting stage for her to tell her stories of her own home country, Cuba. Her pain was so visible. She told the story of communism, how she and her family had to flee Cuba. She told the story of her family losing everything. We assure her, Venezuela would never let communism take over. We like our scotch way too much. Well, she responded, you might be surprised. As we left Doña Elsa's home later that evening, my friend remarked, her trauma is so vivid, as it is almost as she wishes that this would happen to us. I didn't know at the time that Doña Elsa's words were predictive of the future. Now, I find myself having those same conversations in rooms like this about my own experience in Venezuela. In a way, I have become Doña Elsa. I witnessed year after year how my beloved Venezuela became so polarized. Just as Doña Elsa had witnessed it in her beloved Cuba, I saw my family and friends flee Venezuela, leaving behind their possessions in search of opportunity. I have sent medicines and food to my home country. In fact, today, I spent hours trying to figure out how my mom was going to get this medicine, just like Doña Elsa did. A few years back, as I began to reflect on the intricacies of social justice, I started to take notice of the stark similarities and realized that what I witnessed coming to pass in my home country was beginning to take root in my adopted home. More and more, I started to see the differences between the haves and have-nots. I was shocked that something like that could happen in the United States of America, the country of opportunities, the country for all, the country of check and balances, the land of the free, and the home of the braves. Dinner conversations that would have been lovely in previous times began to morph into battlegrounds. Facebook friends started to be deleted or unfollowed. Social media platforms turned into political war zones. And so often, people either shut down or dig their heels even further to their side. We have, in too many instances, stopped listening to each other, and instead, we're actively listening against each other. Let me tell you how I define listening against each other. In my own dictionary, it means when we're pretending to be interested in what the other person is saying, yet we're actively thinking, how can I discredit what this person is saying? Is it gender? Political affiliation? I have heard in my case, in numerous occasions, my accent. When I had come to the country early on, I was part of a working group, and a person stopped me mid-sentence and said in front of everyone, "You're probably very smart, but I don't understand a word of what you say." This reminded me that this wasn't my country. That whatever I was going to do, I had to work twice as hard to make sure people could actually listen to me. While we're supposed to be listening, we're often inadvertently thinking, how can I win the game in this conversation? How can I prove myself the savior and them the villains? Does trying to make change someone's mind like this usually works? I don't know your experience. I haven't seen it work in my case. Could we perhaps learn something about someone else's story by actively listening with open minds and hearts? Could we ask questions that seek clarity to how their life experiences have shaped their beliefs? Could we again converse, actively seeking commonalities, like the fact that we're pretty much all screwed up after this pandemic? What if we provided non-judgmental validation for someone's perspective, even if you don't agree with them entirely? I ask you to pause and think. A moment when you really felt hurt by someone you fundamentally disagree with. How did that make you feel? How powerful could it be that you could actually have someone feel the same? What would it look like if we attentively listened to one another? Do you strive to provide that for people in your family, beyond your social circle, beyond this room, within this room, in your place of employment? What if we converse again with the ultimate goal was not to convince you that my thoughts are right, but instead realize that we have more in common? We must work to empathize with one another. At the end of the day, it's not about convincing you that I'm right, but about the wisdom and growth that comes from having those challenging and enriching conversations. Every human deserves to feel value and have a sense of belonging and connection. And we all play a role in healing our fractured communities. Let it be more about the right thing to do rather than reciprocity. I really don't know what political system or individual could lead my beloved Venezuela out of misery. But what I believe is that if we have listened attentively to each other, if we would have been more empathetic to others' experiences, the pain and collective trauma would have been less. And perhaps we would not be in the streams where we are. Let's seek out of the beauty in our differences, in the ability to respectfully disagree with one another, embrace the disagreements, and engage in positive and thought-provoking conversations. No heroes or villains, just humans willing to learn from each other. Gracias.